Everyone tells you to pick one thing, one career, one skill, one passion. But what if you genuinely can't? You start learning psychology, then you're fascinated by business. You get into filmmaking, then suddenly you're studying neuroscience, then writing, technology, philosophy, and eventually you start wondering, why can't I just focus on one thing? Maybe you've even called yourself distracted, unfocused, someone who starts everything but never sticks with anything. But what if your curiosity isn't the problem? What if you simply haven't learned how to connect it yet? Because sometimes having multiple interests isn't a weakness, it can become an unusual advantage. 1. Your brain starts connecting things other people keep separate. Imagine you study psychology, then you learn storytelling, then you start studying marketing. Individually, each subject gives you useful information, but something more interesting happens when you combine them. You start understanding why certain stories influence people. You understand why certain advertisements feel persuasive. You understand how emotion affects attention. The breakthrough isn't always a completely new idea. Sometimes it's two old ideas colliding in a new way. That's one of the biggest advantages of having multiple interests. You're giving your brain more material to connect. 2. You develop more than one way of seeing a problem. Every field teaches you a different mental lens. Psychology asks, why do people behave this way? Science asks, what evidence supports this? Art asks, how can this be expressed? Business asks, what creates value? If you only think through one lens, you can become extremely good at that lens, but you may miss what another perspective could reveal. Multiple interests force your brain to switch perspectives, and that can make you more mentally flexible. You stop seeing every problem as belonging to only one category. You start asking, what if I look at this differently? Your curiosity can become a creativity engine. Here's something people often misunderstand about creativity. You don't necessarily create something original by knowing something nobody else knows. Sometimes you create something original by combining things that already exist. A person interested in psychology and filmmaking might understand emotion differently. Someone interested in technology and design might create a better product. Someone interested in writing and business might communicate ideas more effectively. Your ingredients become combinations, and the more different ingredients you understand, the more combinations become possible. That's why curiosity can be powerful, not because every interest needs to become a career, but because every interest can give your brain another way to think. You stop building your entire identity around one thing. Imagine someone's entire identity is, I'm a designer. Then one day they lose their job. It doesn't just feel like losing income, it can feel like losing who they are. But imagine your identity has several dimensions. You're a writer, a learner, a creator, a problem solver. Maybe you love psychology. Maybe you build things. Maybe you make videos. One area can fail without making you feel like you have failed. That's a form of psychological flexibility. Your identity has more than one place to stand, and when life forces you to change direction, you don't have to start from zero.
5. You become better at learning unfamiliar things. This might be the most valuable skill of all, not knowing everything, knowing how to learn. Every time you enter a new subject, you practice being a beginner. You learn how to ask better questions, how to find information, how to recognize patterns, how to make mistakes without immediately quitting. Over time, that experience compounds. So when something completely unfamiliar appears in your life, instead of thinking, I don't know how to do this, you start thinking, I don't know how to do this yet. That's a very different mindset. The world keeps changing. Tools change, industries change, technology changes. But if you've learned how to learn, you carry something with you that doesn't become obsolete easily. 6. But there's a trap, and this is where you need to be careful. Having many interests can become an advantage, or it can become an excuse for never getting good at anything. You start 10 projects, finish 2. Learn a new skill whenever the previous one becomes difficult. You keep researching, but rarely practice. You mistake novelty for progress. That's not polymathy. That's scattered attention. A polymath isn't someone who touches everything. It's someone who develops real depth in multiple areas over time. You don't need to master 5 things simultaneously. Choose something to go deep into. Then let your other interests expand the way you think. Your curiosity should feed your main skill, not constantly pull you away from it. Your real advantage is the intersection. Imagine someone who's good at psychology. Another person is good at writing. Another understands business. Another understands visual storytelling. Now imagine one person who understands all 4 reasonably well and knows how to combine them. That person isn't necessarily the world's best psychologist, or the world's best writer, or the world's best designer, but they can create something that requires all 3 ways of thinking at once. That's where the advantage appears, because you're no longer competing only on one skill. You're competing on the combination of skills, and combinations are much harder to copy. So if you've spent years feeling guilty because you're interested in too many things, maybe stop asking, why can't I just focus on one? Ask, what happens if I connect them? Go deep on something. Keep exploring. Learn outside your field. Bring ideas from one world into another. Let your interests collide, because your advantage may not come from knowing one thing better than everyone else. It may come from seeing a connection that nobody thought to make. And maybe that's what being a polymath really means. Not knowing everything, not being a genius at everything, but becoming someone who can enter an unfamiliar world, learn quickly, connect ideas, and eventually create something that couldn't have existed from just one perspective. Your curiosity isn't necessarily distracting you. Maybe it's quietly building the toolkit that will make you different from everyone else.